Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com.
Welcome along to Rugby League Back Chat. We're here at the Pict Sports Bar in Leeds, and joining us this week, nipping in on the way to a cocktail party, it's Danny Lockwood, publisher of League Weekly. Damian Irvine is here. Welcome, Damian, the former chairman of Cronulla and now working as a consultant with the Bradford Bulls. And Richard de la Riviere is also with us from the League Express and author of the book 100 Days That Shook Rugby League. So this week has been the start of the Super 8. Has your pulse been racing with excitement, Danny Lockwood?
No. I think there have been some real talking points, Rob. The capitulation of Catalans, and I think that makes a case for shifting the Challenge Cup date, by the way. But I think that the big story has to be the endangered species that is the Widnes Viking at the moment. I thought they were really poor. I thought that was a defeat that they really couldn't afford. Superb for London. Does that mean we're going to be seeing London, the Broncos, back in Super League next year? Long way to go. But I do think that Widnes have got some real problems on their hand. And I think at this stage, they're looking and hoping to make the £1 million game.
Yeah. Damien, obviously, we mentioned that you were working with Bradford, who are trying to get in to a situation where next year, if it's still in existence, this whole structure, that they may be able to get promoted into Super League. But what's your views been on the opening salvos of the Super 8 qualifiers, and then of course in League One as well?
It's really difficult this time of year, almost starting a secondary competition, and I think some clubs that have performed very well are without key personnel. Albert Kelly's a massive loss to Hull FC, so them going into a new competition for the Premiership, really, or the Championship, to win it is tough without them, and other teams. I mean, you know, losing Ryan Hall at this time of year for Leeds is you know, a really bad issue. So I think it's interesting. I think the top side of the eights will get busier and more exciting as we get towards the semi-final period. I think that the real interest for me at the moment is that middle eights and the battle for relegation almost. And it's really tight, as Danny said. You know, London's performance is phenomenal. Yeah. I thought Halifax were excellent against Toronto as well. And that is, out of all of its period of time and its whole era of this middle eights, it's one you don't want to be in this year. I think for Salford, KR, Leeds and Widnes, wow, it's not the one you wanted to drop into. So I'm watching that with keen interest. As far as Bradford goes, it's first past the post in League One, with a secondary chance for second position, which York are really giving them a good battle for. I don't see much changing into next season, honestly, personally. I think it'll have to stay the same as it is. It's way too late to start looking at recruitment and structures and things to change. And season tickets are on sale for a lot of clubs now as well. You can't just start changing structures for next year. That's probably another story.
Okay, we'll come on to that. Just a general overview, Rich, of what you've seen in the first round of matches, first 80 minutes.
Well, I agree with Damian. I mean, the qualifiers are just so much more exciting, aren't they? I mean, I was more interested in listening to Radio Humberside on Friday night, listening to Hull KR against Salford, than I was watching Wigan against Castleford on Sky. That's where the big stories are. But what does it say about the sport? That is the competition that is most interesting, and the top competition, there's really nothing to play for anybody.
Okay, so here now is the crux of the issue. You've got a competition here which every sport is driven by its elite athletes and its elite teams. That's how it works. Premier League, you know, Tiger Woods, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Roger Federer, you know, whatever sport you want to talk about, it's driven by elite teams and elite athletes. Rugby League is now in a position where the business end of the season is being driven by the teams ranked between 9th and whatever it is, 12, I'm not 14, 16.
I'm not quite buying that, Rod, because I didn't think it was a compelling opening weekend. That was the question you posed. The momentum, as Damian said, will build.
Why will
I think you know, we've always had this argument about teams.
Why will momentum build while the elite teams, and when I say the elite teams, I mean Saints, Wigan, Warrington, and Castleford, are going to meander around in an aimless circle for 8 matches to go nowhere to decide that they're all playing each other again.
That's the famous cynicism, isn't it?
How will momentum build?
Because the biggest crowd of the season in Rugby League in the Northern Hemisphere will be the Grand Final.
Yeah, but that's in October,
that's where everybody wants to be. That's about 6 weeks.
That's in October.
That's 7 weeks.
No, it's not.
But this doesn't really decide who's going to get to the Grand Final.
But the fact is,
the top 4 is done and dusted, pretty much.
It is done and dusted, but that didn't stop Wakefield and Huddersfield pulling out 2 cracking performances, The bottom line, Rod, is that it might not have been a great opening round of the Super 8s, but the momentum will build. I think there will be a real battle for those, positions 2 and 3 particularly.
Fascinating.
And I think that, but it is a valid point. we all like watching a car crash, and that is what the qualifiers are going to be. But we talk about wanting drama throughout the sport. You're getting it at the top and in the middle.
Well, you're not getting it at the top, are you? Let's bring in. Well, let's see what Damian thinks. Is it a complete and utter farce, just going around in circles, where a competition has been created, which you've got fatigued athletes, brackets, that's the ones that are actually fit enough to play, playing games when they're playing the same team for the 4th, 5th and 6th time in a meaningless match, going round and round in circles, a match that nobody wants to watch and nobody wants to play in until you get to the game that everyone wants to watch and wants to play, which is the grand final. So
I think meaningless is the key word there, and you said we need meaningful matches, and I think I don't necessarily agree that it's a shame that we're focusing at the moment on that qualifying round, because that'll change over time. In 8 weeks, that'll be clearer on who is gone out of that and who is not competing. I think because it's rounds 1, 2 and 3 at the moment,
of course.
That'll sort itself out.
Everyone's starting on 0, so it's bound to be competitive.
It is competitive. I think in the top end, look, the structure can probably change a little bit. I think the key is you need to keep as many clubs as possible in meaningful matches as long as you can throughout the year.
Right.
That's the key to the EFL model. It's the key to even Premiership model, is that you can still make Europe. You can be into trying to chase in the Europe sides. You can try and get in that top 7 for a playoff position, even if you're mid-table. The last place commercially you want to be as a sport or as a club is in mid-table mediocrity for long periods of time. So you need to focus on the fact that maybe we can change the semi-final setup. Maybe it's just maybe this year that the top teams have spread out and have got away. But hey, I've just said Albert Kelly's missing Hull FC. That can be a key thing. So let's just see how it pans out in a few weeks.
Well, Rich, isn't it true that this structure makes the biggest game in the first phase 8th versus 9th? And in the second phase, the biggest game is 4th versus 5th, when everybody knows that in any sport, the big game should be 1st versus 2nd, which we'd had recently when Wigan played St Helens and no one was interested. And this week, we had Wigan versus who did they play this
Castleford.
Week? Castleford, when it was 2nd v 3rd, and no one was interested.
Wigan v Cass might have been better for the last weekend.
But you just said you weren't interested in Wigan v Cass.
Well,
you're more interested.
It's the most interesting thing out of a pretty dull 7
but you were more
weeks.
interested in something that's going on in
I was.
Yeah.
What we've really got in rugby league now with the qualifiers is that yes, it's interesting, and what Damian says he's right, is that there's a lot to play for, and the qualifiers is big because there's so much at stake. But what the sport needs to do is try and find a happy medium between that and some sort of long-term sustainability. Because what we have at the moment is a situation where the 9th best team in Super League could miss out on 8th by points difference and then get relegated a few weeks later. And then you have a scenario, a bit like with Bradford now, where you've got a team who are just in a division that they're far too good for, and Toronto last season.
I think York could say something about that.
All right, but what we ideally need in rugby league is for all teams to be in divisions, roughly speaking, that they're in the right divisions. And if we end up with 9th getting relegated or 4th from the Championship getting promoted,
the bottom team should be relegated.
One up, one down is sustainable. It is the best structure, but the problem is, as Damian says, you'll get more dead rubber fixtures towards the end of the season.
We are where we are for this season, and possibly for next season and the season after. We'll see about that. But what I don't like about it all, Rod, is the fact that
information about that
is the fact that we start again from the squad's point of view. Wakefield actually, they've had 2 great years by Wakefield standards, based on a season where they basically capitulated, decided that they were going to just throw it all in, regather for the qualifiers, which they got through. They survived.
Yeah, but I think what happened just in the defence of Michael Carter, what happened there was that actually happened by accident, that they ended up recycling the squad. If you remember, they sent some players. And they basically got rid of players for disciplinary reasons. Ended up bringing in new. It was all a bit of a mishmash. But then, of course, once that model had worked,
and now we've seen it, and it's been taken
to
the nth degree, to the point that Lee basically roll over for the bellies tickling a week before the deadline day, and everybody feeds except Toronto. So if I was running Toronto right now, I'd be pretty miffed about the fact that all of my key competitors have been able to restaff ahead of the critical part of the season.
But they could have restaffed as well.
They signed Caton Brown, didn't they?
They signed Caton Brown.
No, they've got a player, but there are clubs that have absolutely
fed on it.
I think the principle is wrong.
It does make it farcical that you can bring all these guys in. When Warrington brought in Andrew Johns 12, 13 years ago, that was great, and there was so much publicity. But then the RFL immediately closed that loophole. And then now, without any announcement, it suddenly just seems to have been relaxed.
That was great for the sport.
Yeah, and then they stopped it.
But of course, not great if you were playing against Warrington in playoffs.
Well, he lost 2 of his 3 games.
They lost to Hull, didn't they?
The key is mix though there with Wakefield as well, and sometimes structure can force really positive change. I think, and to their credit, I think that's an open story that they're not spending their full cap there at Wakefield. Yeah. Hey, they're not in the relegation qualifiers at the moment, and that's a great result for I think both recruitment and the way the club's been managed.
They're a good news story.
I like to see clubs that aren't overspending on rosters but are getting good value for their rosters, and I think we mentioned Lee there. Obviously, that's probably the flip side. Through no intent, or it's not a personal thing, but you've got two clubs there on different trajectories that 12 months later, I think one has taken a positive out of where they were in that fringe relegation, and one has probably done it the wrong way.
Mr. Beaumont and Lee was paying a wage bill that should have got better results.
100%. And Rod, I honestly think, personally, coming from the outside in from the NRL, I think that's a symptom of a wider issue of the game. I don't think recruitment here done well. I don't think the values paid for imports is anywhere close to what it should be. I was on the other end of the phone, trying to sell players not that long ago, and being really happy about some of the bites you get in terms of the offers, and I know a lot of players that probably weren't cut in it or didn't have options in the NRL, getting paid too much to come here. And I'm a massive proponent of the English game. I really think the RFL needs to have a look at the import rule, because if you keep bringing in halves that aren't quite there in the NRL, paying them too much, no wonder you're not winning World Cups. I'm sorry. No, really. You've got to have half-backs that are bred from here.
Agree with every word of that.
Can I just ask you, Damian? I mean, the Championship clubs want the current structure to stay in place. Forgive me for being cynical, is that because there are 4 possibilities of getting promoted, you can finish 4th and still be in the race? But if that's the case, isn't the flip side then that once you get into Super League, if Bradford do, then there's just much more chance of getting sucked into a relegation battle, and that's not good for the sustainability of the club, is it?
I tend to think you've got to back yourself as a club. I think if you're a club now and going into the Championship next year and you really have a Super League aspiration, I think you have to be prepared to finish 1 or 2 to do that. I think that's what Toronto did. I don't think they backed being 4th or 3rd. They had to be the best to get through.
But that's why I think 1 and 1 down would be better than the qualifiers, because if you are finishing 3rd and 4th, you're probably not going to go up. But if Hull KR go down this time, I think that's a disaster, and I think that's really bad for the sport. It happened 2 years ago, and they'd been in Super League for 11 years, and you just think, well, okay, that happens. They've done everything right. They've come down, they've regrouped, they went back up as the best team. They've had a really, really good season. They've had a lot of injuries. They've still managed to do well, finish way above Widnes, and they could get sucked into a relegation battle.
When they got relegated, they weren't the worst team.
Well,
there's no question about that. They were unlucky in a couple of matches.
Exactly, and if they go down again, you've really got to worry about the club and the whole future of the club.
Right. Let's have a quick show of hands on this, if you like. Right, carry on with this caper, or play there's 12 teams, play everybody home and away once. That's 22 games. Give the title to the team that finishes top. Right, no. Even I have to accept that is my dream scenario will not emerge. But then play the top 5 playoff that they had in the first place, 1998, when they stumbled upon the best playoff system, and have 1 up, 1 down. Is that better, Damien, than what they've got with the Super 8s? Or,
if you want to remove the jeopardy with a massive change, which can be 3 or 4 up and 4 down.
But you would guarantee that 1 would go up and 1 would go down. That would be guaranteed, not this anything between 0 and 4.
Oh, there's a model that is existing as being proposed,
and I
think and I've spoken to Ralph about it, and he's sort of had a similar view.
Right.
You can solve both problems. You need clubs with aspiration, you need to have something to play for as much as you can during the year. So you need as many clubs as possible that can get in that top 5. How many of that top 5 then go up, I think, is another story. So I think first past the post automatic promotion is pretty sensible. I think anyone could argue on football merit, on rugby merit, that Toronto should go up first past the post in that model.
Yeah, they were the best team.
I think if you then had a playoff series, a McIntyre system, it's quite common throughout world sport, from 2, 3, 4 and maybe even 5, who play off for the right to play second in a qualifier to go up. Happy days, you're still getting £1 million game, but it's for promotion rather than relegation. And I think that's the model. You've still got people right up to the last couple of rounds fighting for that final playoff spot. It's not dissimilar to EFL playoffs, and it works. It's okay to sort of use something that's worked elsewhere. It's okay. I think the wholesale competition change can probably be looked at, but it gets to the process of changing it. Well, look, we've got time to change it. Let's not change it on issues that aren't really about the structure. And I think this whole Super League v Championship issue has been fought on power and other issues, which have probably been coming through for a couple of years. So let's not argue structure in that environment. I say let's put a cap on it. Let's say next year stays the same. let's have a 6-month, 8-month consultancy period where we'll consult with supporters, the broadcasters, sponsors, and let's come up with a robust proposal. And then let's look at changing that in due course. Right. The one reason everyone's scared of this change or proposals at the moment is everyone's feeling rushed. Yeah. They're feeling it's trying to be bulldozed through. Yeah. Let's just do it in a proper process. We're a big sport, it's a big decision.
If we were redrawing the sport from scratch, we would not arrive at a system that we have today, that's for sure.
No. Right.
The decisions are made on the back of myths, and they're not argued through properly. And when somebody comes up with a new idea, if somebody speaks out against it, they're sort of castigated as a bit of a dinosaur and we don't want to hear from you. And so we plough ahead with a half-baked idea that's been drawn up on the back of a cigarette pack. I mean, that was licensing. Yeah. Licensing wasn't thought through properly. The Super 8s haven't been thought through properly, and that's why we are where we are now. Going back to your original question, I want one up, one down, because history proves that if you finish top of the second tier, you will be good enough to go into the top division and thrive. There's been 40 odd years of promotion and relegation in the history of rugby league. It started in about 1902 and it's been on and off, but mainly since 1974. There's only been 2 instances in the game's history of a team going up as the best team who have then finished bottom. Yeah. So that is proof that in a one up, one down system, the promoted team will nearly always survive.
Okay, we're going to hold it there because we need to take a couple of breaks. We'll come back and talk about more about the qualifiers and the Super 8s and so on and so forth. We also want to talk about Shaun Edwards joining Wigan, but we'll be doing that in a few minutes here on Rugby League Backchat.
Rugby League Backchat is sponsored by TotalRL.com.
Welcome back to Rugby League Backchat from the Pick Sports Bar here in Leeds. And joining us tonight, Danny Lockwood from League Weekly, League Express's Richard de la Riviere, also the author of 100 Days of the Shook Rugby League, and the former chairman of the Cronulla Sharks. Damian Irvine is here also. We were talking before the break about the structure and the way it is. There was those of us that said it should never have been introduced in 2015, not just me. The Players Union, as was then League 13, said the same thing. They were ignored. We were all ignored. We are where we are now. But let's just talk to Damien, who's the commercial expert here. Let me just give you the attendances, Damien, compared with the league games of the season. Wigan v Cass, 11,866 before, 10,293 in the Super 8s. Saints Huddersfield, 10,278. to 8,979. I could go on. Even these qualifiers that everyone says are the great interest. Hull v Salford, 7,698 down to 7,081. Halifax versus Toronto, 2,036 down to 1,774. So do those figures bear out that something's got to give here? Or will momentum build, as Danny Lockwood said?
I think the figures on their own probably don't tell the full story. Right. I think there are other variables in terms of crowds, which is a great another discussion altogether.
Well, there's summer holidays apart from anything, Rod. A lot of people are away.
Right. I think
crowds
so.
have always gone down for Super League playoffs, though, even in the sort of halcyon days of the top
playoffs
five.
The panacea to all ills.
Well, again, I think we've got an extended playoff. 8 playoff games is significantly different to 3 crucial ones. So I think there's always going to be a little drop off before these 2 Super 8 competitions start to get interesting. And I don't mean to disrespect what's going on now, but there will be games which
feel free to disrespect away.
There's going to be games that will end seasons, and they will see relegation coming up. And I think, as Danny said earlier, people do like that train wreck in sport. It's written on us why we watch car racing. There's no other reason. We want to see the crash, and so I think that'll happen. Crowds will come, but I do think it's a wider issue. I mean, we're talking about clubs that come into this competition in Championship and League One level significantly under-resourced. In terms of fan engagement, marketing, they have to charge a pretty good wedge for a ticket compared to what they probably would like to, because they need to stay sustainable. So it's a wider issue about getting those bums on seats, which the game has to look at, as opposed to just the fixtures, I think.
Okay, right. So let's just look at what actually happened on the pitch. In the top, was anybody Was anybody remotely bothered about the fact that Wakefield were probably bothered, they beat Hull, Saints lost again to Huddersfield, Warrington tonked the Catalans, which Danny mentioned earlier, and what was a really exciting comeback by Castleford Tigers that made it look slightly closer than it actually was, Wigan beat Castleford.
I think the point I took out of Wigan and Castleford's game, I didn't think it was a great game at all. It turned out it ended up a lot more exciting than it was. Really, I would have loved to have been inside the heads of Adrian Lamb first and foremost, and of course Shaun Edwards, who we're going to come on to. Looking at that squad with 3 of its key players and key performers. But I just thought that Wigan, by winning that, by edging that, probably I think they came close to cementing second spot.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think, look, you know
3
what,
points ahead of Warrington and Castleford.
We talk a lot about symptoms and all the things that we've sort of mentioned, from crowds to the performances on the pitch at the moment in the start of this, are symptoms. And we're looking at symptoms. If you look for reasons, and it's a wider game issue, one of the key things in an NRL squad in building an NRL year, and that's a home and away competition predominantly. One of the key things, and stats will tell you, Richie, you're big on the stats and you know the game very well in Australia, is teams that use fewer starting players. So the teams that use the least players throughout a season generally are at the top.
Yep.
Okay.
That's interesting.
If you can get a 24 use player year, Rod, is a good number.
Yeah.
You look at premiership winning teams, Cronulla in 16 of that.
St Helens are that team.
Right, correct.
And
so what I'm saying is that's a symptom. So if you're using 28, 32 players in your 17 over the course of a year, it's way too many. Yeah. Now, we've just talked about how we have this wholesale import-export period leading up to this. So by definition, we're creating big squad use over a period from game one to that. Right. So you're going to get a quality drop. And I think we saw it on the weekend. I think we are fundamentally changing what's really important. And as you say, St Helens, they'll have a lean patch, they'll flatten because you're not rotating as much. But I guarantee you, in a playoff match, that's the squad you want to be.
But Huddersfield have used the most though this season, and they're the form team at the moment. Broadly speaking, you're right.
There's always going to be
because they've got guys back. They're closest to their full strength.
How many have they used since they had a coaching change? Oh well, see, that's the stat.
That is the point. Well. But also, and I buy the principle absolutely, Damian. But the point of the guys and the consistency of being able to select is that the teams in the bottom 4, however many players they've used, they've finished in the bottom 4 for a reason. And you look at that Widnes side, and I know they've got injuries and all those problems, but the fact is those guys, I would argue, are not good enough. And so you are going to generate
by
turnover
definition,
just by that.
And again, I don't want to use too many football analogies, but clubs that are going well on smaller budgets generally have a long-term manager. Your Gareth Ainsworth, your Tidsdales, and so in a consistent performance. What I would say is, by definition, when you change management or change head coach, you change personnel. Whether Leeds jumped too early is a big debate. I think they did. I think the best person to get them out of where they were was the incumbent coach with the squad he used. We'll never know that, but personally, I'm a stay with what you know and we'll let them dig themselves out of a hole, and don't use a whole bunch of new players. It'll even out towards the end of the year.
You asked about the games, right? I think the most interesting story is possibly St Helens, because you can say it's just a 2-game blip, but I think for the 6 weeks leading up to the Challenge Cup semi-final, they hadn't looked particularly good. And what are they, 6 points clear at the top, something like that?
8 points ahead. They've got 42 and we're going to got 34.
I would argue that Ben Barber is responsible for probably what they're clear by. He's probably won them maybe 4 games that they would have lost. That's what he's been worth. He hasn't played well since pretty much June now.
Is that because we think he's switched off and he's heading home?
Possibly, but for whatever the reason,
he doesn't switch off. But he's a patch player in terms of he'll put 12 of the best.
But he
weeks
needs to find his form.
Yeah.
He needs to find. Saints were certainties for Super League. We would have all thought. I know you think there's nothing certain of, but I mean they looked.
So they can never be certainty, can
they? They looked as though they were running away with it, and no one else was pushing it.
Is it one of these things that the narrative when the results are in the ledger and the history is written of the 2018 season, if St Helens win the grand final, it will be because they picked the same team as often as they could and didn't rest players, and if they don't win the grand final, it will be because they picked the same team every week and didn't rest players.
Yeah, look,
the narrative will be written, whichever way.
It will be, and all you can look at is probably...
if they win, Justin Holbrook will be right, and if they lose, Justin Holbrook will be wrong.
It comes down to performance. It comes down to performance.
Justin and Mike Rush and those guys, they have a job to do, and that job to do in running that rugby league club is risk mitigation.
Yeah.
Alter what variables you can. And stats tell us that if you use a smaller squad, generally,
Yep.
over time, over a number of
better
years,
results.
you're giving yourself a best shot. You can't stipulate
just a
what
word-
way the ball bounces or who's going to get injured.
Sure.
You can't take those out. But in terms of giving themselves the best chance, they've given themselves the best chance.
Just a word on Justin. You two guys don't seem to be in favour of changing coaches, but they changed their coach a year ago, and they barely changed any players.
Well, they brought in and won the best player in the competition.
Yeah, but they've gone from being way off the pace to significantly
So,
less.
I'm not a favourite of changing players because it often comes with wholesale change
But
of staff.
he's
if you
come
bring
in
in
and
an
made him-
incumbent or you bring the right person in without you
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Think it is.
I mean,
Cunningham's record is painted as much worse.
Well, yeah, but
Where
that's
is
just
he-
going
where
on
is he at
wins.
the
That's
moment?
his style of
Well,
play.
he was at Lee, but he's been let go by Lee, hasn't he? Yeah.
Well,
Style of play
he's
is a big
overseen
thing
that,
there as
that
well.
roster at Lee.
Yeah.
You know, so I think we can all judge results. All you can do is minimise
I
the
think
risk.
a lot of it, of course, is the style of play, isn't it?
Yeah.
So St Helens are much more attractive to the eye now. So even if the results were similar, Holbrook is going to get more praise because they're much better to watch than this
But the
turgid
teams, the
stuff they were
teams that are
churning out
playing the
before.
nice football over the last 18 months have generally been rewarded.
Yeah, well,
with
good. And
results.
so they should. That's what they want.
but
to
that's
see.
just where we are at the
Yeah.
and I
moment.
don't
Yeah.
think any coach goes into a season wanting to have a huge turnover of players. You don't want to be using 26, 28, 30 staff. But the fact is that Castleford last year enjoyed an uncommonly good run of luck with injuries.
As St Helens have
As
this year.
St Helens have this year.
Yeah.
So it bears out that
Well, if you
that
put your best players
principle,
on the
but-
pitch, you like to get better results,
Yep,
aren't you?
absolutely.
Yeah,
obviously.
Obviously. And that's also, I think, the situation with Leeds as well. Quite apart from the fact that they've had, they've lost legends of,
Yeah.
they've had a woeful time with injuries.
I'll be biased, but I think you got two. We talked about imports before, and often they're the flair players, your 6-7s, your 1s, and we talked about Ben Barber's form. I've got to say, Ben's form will be reliant on how well his fringe back rowers are going forward and tackling, how well his props are completing as well. So maybe the symptom there is elsewhere rather
Yeah, I
than
think
Ben's
the-
form.
the-
And
the
the other
Saints
one is
forwards,
you
yeah.
look at the clubs. You mentioned Castleford had a great year last year. You talk about St Helens this year. You got two imports there who I think are the best value imports you've had in the UK probably 12 years. I think you've got Grant Millage and you've got Luke Douglas. Now they will go ahead as full professionals all day long and do a very, very good job. Grant's been the stower of that club.
Yeah, very good.
That's where you want to invest in experienced professional back rowers and front rowers. They'll affect your squad far better than bringing in a halfback for 6 months who's going to go home again on a new contract. There's exceptions. I'm a massive fan of Todd Carney, a massive fan of Albert Kelly, and I think they can do a job in short periods of time, as Chris Sandow and Gidley did at Warrington. But you can't build squads, and that shouldn't be part of your recruitment policy. If you can add them in, certainly, but not at the expense of a British 6 or 7 or a British 1.
Well,
You've
you're
got to
signing
keep your
our old
spine
men now
British.
in Ryan
You've got to keep them. We're signing your hookers. I think. And then look, we built a club in Cronulla. Not me, but the forefathers in '67 on two great British rugby league players, Tommy Bishop and Cliff Watson.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm a massive fan of that. Why have we gone away from that and trying to copy the Australians in the NRL model? I've got no idea. We want Malcolm Riley, Bobby Goulding. That's who you should be having to play against and developing. So personally, I'd have a quota system 100% where you've got to start British 1s, 6s, 7s and 9s.
Crikey, that's radical.
That's one for you, Rod. Yeah, I like that sort of stuff.
I have to go digest that one.
If your spines, all of a sudden you've got 20 good halves running around who are competing, not just one Luke Gale or and some fringe ones. You've got to have competition for those spots.
Just on your original point, I think the St Helens forwards are looking a little bit beatable now. I think Catalan's really exposed them. I think Luke Thompson and McCarthy Scarborough still play
See,
well.
Catalan do what they do well. They do what the French have always done well. They're brutal, they're effective, and they're a very robust pack in that they'll come out on short, sharp, and they'll come at you. They really will. So St Helens a bit sitting ducks
I
there.
think Saints looking a little bit fragile up front, and they're going to suffer this week as well, of course, because they don't have Luke Thompson now, who's been banned for a game.
Tell us about that, Danny.
Well,
what happened?
I've seen it a couple of times on video, and
you outraged?
I'm disappointed.
You often are
I thought it was unnecessary. The guy gets up, he's celebrating, he throws the ball down, it bounces, it hits the in-goal referee on the leg, and he gets a ban for it. Really?
Once you're whatever the ball ends up, you're responsible for it ending up there, aren't you? So even if you sort of just throw it aimlessly blindfold, if it hits the referee, you're going to be in trouble.
I don't think the official has got a ruptured ACL.
No.
How long did he get?
He got one and if he'd thrown it at the official, yes, absolutely, he didn't. it was.
But I was saying earlier, wasn't I, that Tim Henman belted a ball away at Wimbledon once in just a fit of peak, and it hit the ball girl, didn't it?
Yeah.
And he was just ejected from the game.
But isn't the point there the fit of peak?
He didn't do it deliberately.
It was a fit of peak.
Did anger it, yeah.
Thompson was celebrating and threw a ball on the floor, and it.
Right, so I think he should be booked in football, wouldn't he? I think.
Gary Neville got sent off for kicking the ball into the crowd and hit
I'm not
the
saying
spectator when playing for Man United in 2005.
I'm not saying there shouldn't be a sanction, Rod. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a sanction. I'm just saying that to me
is a bit
considering that Chris Houston had got only 2 matches for ending Phil Bentham's career.
Right. What I want to do is just quickly go through the qualifiers, because you said that was the most interesting thing. We haven't even talked about it. Right, the qualifiers. Right, let me give you some bookmakers odds. Right, Leeds are 1-12. This is to finish in the top 3 and to be automatically put back into Super League. Leeds are 1-12. Salford are 2-5 and Toronto at 4-7. So all those teams, the bookmakers believe, have got more than an even chance of making the top 3. And then Hull KR 10-11, which is a coin flip. And then London Broncos are 4-1, 7-1 Widnes, 12 Toulouse, 33 Halifax. So those are the odds to finish in the top 3. Of course, they could still be promoted for the £1 million game. But is that a fair reflection of where we're at the moment? That Leeds look an absolute banker. Salford have put themselves in a great position by winning at Hull KR. A brilliant result. Toronto look are in good shape, and Hull KR are in jeopardy.
That's kind of over. I think that's overstating Toronto's odds because they've got.
They're not as good as that.
I don't think they are. It isn't that they're not as good as that. It's just that they've benefited this year from having tranches of games home and away. But everybody else has only got to go to Toronto.
I don't think they'll beat Hull KR. Well, they've got K and Russell possibly out of that game.
But Toronto are now having for the first time Toronto are having to go and come. They're not used to doing that.
No.
I think that jet lag factor will play against them more than any of the other clubs.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Salford are a little bit. I don't think they're the best value there at those odds. I thought the game between Salford and KR was really going to set up the fortunes of one of those sides in terms of one of them probably being in the middle eights and in the £1 million game. Yeah. So I think Salford they've not got a deep squad. We know they're running on bare bones over there.
Yes, it's true. They got injured.
I think
they play Widnes at home, Damien, this week.
Well, Jackson Hastings has
they need to win,
isn't it?
and they need to win and win well against Widnes.
I think Widnes, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they do. I think they're very well coached. KR, I've got to say. Yeah. I think Tim has been preparing for this for a little while. I think bringing Todd in was a great move. He's not played a lot of rugby league, so he needs to stay fit. I think for their fortunes.
And I know this flies counterintuitive to what you were saying, but bringing Jackson Hastings in,
been incredible. Personally, I wouldn't have. But it's a great move. I think they've done well. I've probably been proven wrong there a little bit.
He's a player that's too good for that level of competition.
He is, but Jackson,
really, isn't he?
After 8 weeks, we'll know.
Okay,
I think so many imports for the first 1 or 2 games go very. We've seen it a number of times. Really good debuts for their local club over here. A lot of excitement, a lot of adrenaline. He's going to get into the wear and tear week to week stuff in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see.
Very quickly then, the top 3 teams are going to be.
Well, I'm not so certain about Leeds yet. I think Hull KR will get in there, and I'd say Leeds.
Top 3? You think Leeds will be the top 3?
No, I think they will be. I don't think they'll be top necessarily. I think Toronto might end up in the £1 million game, so I'll go for Salford, Leeds, Hull KR.
Salford, Leeds, Hull KR, right?
Leeds, Hull KR, Salford.
Leeds, Hull KR, Salford.
Yeah, Toronto, Leeds and Salford for me.
Toronto, Leeds and Salford. Well, we shall see what happens there. It's an interesting scrap and some very important games coming up this weekend, and none more so than Toronto versus the Hull Kingston Rovers in Canada. Right, we'll be back in a couple of minutes to discuss Shaun Edwards' appointment and Adrian Lamb's appointment by the Wigan Warriors as their coaching team over the next couple of seasons. Join us in a couple of minutes.
Rugby League Backchat is sponsored by TotalRL.com.
Welcome back to Rugby League Backchat, coming to you from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds. Danny Lockwood, Richard de la Riviere and Damian Irvine are our guests this week. Let's talk about the appointment by Wigan of Adrian Lamb for 2019 as their head coach. He's currently assistant to Mal Meninga in the Australian setup on a one-year deal. Then he'll be replaced by Shaun Edwards, OBE, from 2020, who was last in rugby league in the year 2000, Danny. You're just about old enough to remember that, aren't you? 15 years at Wigan, 452 appearances, over 1,000 points, Man of Steel 1990, 36 Great Britain. I mean, one of the most decorated players in the history of rugby league. But what do you make of this double appointment, if you like?
I think it's a great news story from the point of view of Shaun Edwards. I think it's super for Wigan. I think it's super for the sport. I'm excited. I'm sorry that it isn't happening sooner. I'm kind of puzzled by the dynamic of it, of Adrian Lamb. What if he does if he sweeps the board?
Well, just to point out, it's not happening sooner because Shaun Edwards is part of the Wales, still with the Wales coaching set with Warren Gatland for the World Cup in 2019 for rugby union.
We all understand that, but I just think that it's a strange appointment in terms of you just give a guy a 12-month job no matter how well he does. We understand that Shaun Edwards is going to be involved with Adrian Lamb this season, I imagine, in terms of recruitment, because that is going to be massive for Wigan over the next 6 months, let alone the next 18 months. Is it a risk because Shaun Edwards has never coached rugby league before? Not at all. I love the quote he came out with at the weekend is, same size field, same ball, same posts. A guy with his wealth of experience is just going to be a hit. I really think it's great.
It's not the same size field if he was coaching at Castleford, though, is it?
I think Tigers fans who took on Alan Jones after he was at the Wallabies might disagree that it's that simple a change. I think, look, for one, on Adrian in the short term, I think that's a really good appointment. If you need to have a filler, because of the circumstances contractually.
And he's bought into it, obviously.
Adrian's the right man. He's a legend of the club over there. He's well thought of. But to Adrian, if you look through his career, is an assistant. That's what he does. Through the Roosters, we had him at Cronulla as assistant over a period of time. Yes. And certainly at the rep games. He's an out-and-out assistant coach. I don't know if he was going to be a first team coach, head coach, I think he would have been by now. He's a very, very good assistant.
It's a very interesting point, that, David. And just to link in with Danny's point, if Adrian Lamb wins the treble in 2019, could you see him carrying on as the assistant then to Shaun Edwards?
I honestly can, because I think he's demonstrated in his career and his moves that he's not necessarily aspirational to be that head coach. He's quite happy to be an assistant. And some incredibly good head coaches in the NRL. I think Trent Robinson, Brad Fittler, Ricky, he might have had him at Cronulla. So I think that's a good choice. I don't think there's an ego there with Adrian, and that's the most important thing. And what a great, we talked about risk mitigation and where you need to be running a club. What a great position to be in if their big trouble is that they've won a treble and they've got to find a role for Adrian. Yeah. So let's not overstate it.
It's not ideal. I mean, I see the positives, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying about Adrian Lamb, but you just described him as a filler. I mean, this is Wigan. This is pretty much the biggest club in the game, and they're sort of having to settle for a filler. If he does badly, people might sort of want him out before it comes to the end of the year. And of course, if he does well, then what happens? But if he stays on as assistant, having won the treble, that puts Edwards under the most ridiculous pressure. I've got no doubt that Edwards will transition smoothly back to the rugby league. But if he gets off to a bad start on the back of Adrian Lamb doing well,
I don't think it's any great secret that Ian Lenigan has dreamt of having Shaun Edwards as his coach well before Ian Lenigan was even the owner of Wigan Warriors. I think there was an inevitability that Edwards was going to turn up at some point.
Shaun is going to need a first grade quality head coach as an assistant. Well, he's going to need to. He's not been in the game that length of time.
I spoke to him a couple of months ago did an interview with him, and he said that. He said, I'm going to need good assistants.
He's going to need it. But Adrian might well be the perfect person.
And it begs the question of just how much time Shaun Edwards will be devoting to Wigan this year, because of course he's going to have some time. If I'm
the Welsh Rugby Union, I don't want to spend any time on it.
But in an ideal world,
honestly, if I'm governed to run that game and pay a contract, and I'm pulling the coaching structure management team in and saying, hang on, this guy's recruiting for a rugby league side over there for next year, I don't want that. So let's be fair. I think
it'd be interesting to see how it works if it does.
Well, and likewise, if Adrian is he's described as the head coach, not interim, he is described as the head coach in his own right, so why should he have to deal with somebody else ringing him up saying, look, why don't you do it like this, why don't you do it like that?
It throws it all into the mix, doesn't it?
One of the great rugby union defensive coaches in the modern era is Les Kiss, who's a great North Sydney player. I think he was with Manly as well. I shudder, I get goosebumps when I say that word, Manly. But I think Les is a rugby league defensive structure expert in rugby union, and he sort of paved the way. He's the equivalent of Shaun Edwards almost in that role. Les is never going to be an option for a first grade rugby league coach anywhere in the world, Super League or there. So if you're looking at apples and apples,
right. So
I'm not sure about
this is quite interesting because Edwards was the head coach of Wasps in 2005 when they won the championship. He was at Wasps as an assistant. They won the Heineken Cup a couple of times. Very good record as assistant with Wales. A couple of Grand Slams, World Cup semi-final. But
very different in an assistant in an international setup.
It's an assistant, an international setup in a different code. Does that remotely translate into being a head coach of a club game in rugby league?
I get what Damian was saying about
that's the question, isn't it?
I think it comes down to personality and character.
But Adrian Lamb could bring that to the table, that week-to-week ins and outs.
There are some assistants and there are some defensive coaches. You talk about Les Kiss. I think it comes down to personality and character. And I think everything about Shaun Edwards tells you that he is a man of absolute quality and character and a leader.
Okay.
And I think he'll be fine.
And he's going into a very, very friendly environment. He's got a great chairman support and all that. So he's going to have everything at his disposal. He won't have the week-to-week politics or anything that other coaches come into. So he's well placed.
This is the next question then. There's absolutely no correlation whatsoever between being a playing legend at a club and being a good coach there.
No, of course.
But a lot of the best coaches that have ever been, let's take
great players generally.
Maguire coming across. Never been to Wigan in his life, as far as I'm aware, but tremendously successful. You can go to football. Alex Ferguson never been at Man United. Wenger had never been at Arsenal. You go around talk about that. So there's no correlation. Is this appointment, or is this unfair to say this, an appointment by a Wigan fan for the Wigan fans?
No.
Right.
It's the right man for the right job.
You think this is the best man for the job regardless?
I think absolutely it is.
I agree with Denny in that, because Wigan are a club that are big enough and have the resources to make it the right decision. Yeah. If it were a lesser club, and I don't want to disrespect any clubs, but someone didn't have the resources or the size of a Wigan, where he had to do...
They could get virtually not any coach in the world, but they're shopping in a very...
But Shaun's not going to have to be picking up the phone to managers, recruitment. He's not going to check in on medical. He's not going to have to look after visas. He's not going to have to do all this stuff, which 80% of clubs at lower level have to. So he's the right man in that regard, because he'll have two people around him that can be doing that.
If I was a Wigan fan, I might share some of your concerns.
You get excited about the fact it's Shaun Edwards.
Well, it's their club though, and they're desperate for it to be the right appointment. So I can understand some of them asking questions.
Would they get excited if they'd appointed Eddie Jones or Stuart Lancaster, whose qualifications are probably better?
Possibly not. But just the point that I want to make.
So is he an appointment just because he used to play for Wigan?
As a rugby league,
doesn't have a rugby league
as a general rugby league fan, not a Wigan fan, I'm very excited because I think British rugby league coaching has been in a cul-de-sac for a long time, where Michael Maguire had a very big influence on a whole generation of coaches, and I think we need an outsider to come in and take the game away from Maguire's endless block plays and wrestling, and just someone with a slightly different approach. But he's also got a big profile as Edwards. And a lot of, in football, the big managers tend to be the ones with the big profiles, and it's nice to have a bit of that in
that worries me a little bit. And I agree with you, but it worries me.
Good for column inches and media coverage.
Oh no, not Shaun. I'm not saying Shaun worries me. What worries me is a perception that we haven't got enough English coaches and doing a good job out there. I think we're very reluctant to promote coaches from the lower leagues where they've done a job. And I put Alan Kilshaw in that role. I put Mr. Naylor over at Oldham in a role. I think Ford at York is doing a great job. Now, there are three men that if I'm Lanigan and I couldn't get Adrian Lamb, because Adrian is a club legend, I'm looking at them, those sort of people has been an assistant to a Shaun Edwards.
Darryl Powell is an example of that.
In the last 20 years, there's only been 4 coaches have moved from the Championship to Super League. It's a ridiculously low number.
How many assistants, though, that should probably go on? I'd like to see that more.
There should be more. I'm not disagreeing there should be more. But to look at, thank you.
So how many years is that? 20, sorry?
I think 4 since Super League years. Since the
it's a ridiculous number.
Yeah, it's a very small number. But the bigger picture for me, Damian, is in my lifetime, let's say in the last 40 years, I could probably name 10 super coaches from Australia. I can't name any in the same period. We just don't produce good coach. I mean, it's not necessarily
you don't produce them. I think you don't give them the contracts.
It's not just that they don't get a chance. There's no one who's ever really emerged as a great coach. We just don't.
I know he's had a bad year as Brian McDermott, but
somebody has to win the trophies, though, Danny. If you're one of the big clubs,
absolutely.
How many super coaches from Australia won the trophies?
Well, Brian Smith didn't famously, but I still think he was a wonderful coach who had a heck of an influence on the modern game. I just don't see, looking at the last 30, 40 years, any British coaches that stand up as genuine all-time greats.
But they've won more trophies than super coaches from Australia.
Yeah, if you're at Wigan, Leeds or Saints, though, you're going to win Super League.
Yeah.
Don't forget, the Aussies that came here, Nathan Browns, etc., weren't coaches when they came here. Alan Wilson was a great coach, but he came and produced
in the early
here.
Super League years, though, Brian Smith and Graham Murray at Leeds were very, very good coaches, and then
very influential.
And then Ian Millwood was an excellent coach at St Helens, not so good at Castleford and Wigan, but Ian Millwood at Saints, I still think is the best.
But it's you talk about winning the trophies. Is there a demand at Wigan now? It's not just about winning. There's been a real backlash from supporters and this is boring rugby, and even when they were winning they were saying it was boring rugby and they weren't satisfied with it. So do you think Lamb first of all, and then Edwards, who's bear in mind is a defensive coach in rugby union ironically, can bring a bit more champagne stuff and what you'd expect from a top class team like Wigan? Is that the key?
That has to be the Wigan goal, I think. And I think you're absolutely right. And as successful as Shaun Wayne has been, and as popular as he is, and as great a developmental coach of the Wigan youth system as he's been, the fact is it has been a little bit one-dimensional. It has cost them, I think, over the years in terms of both support and silverware. And I think that there is a look to that. I think that there is a real need for Wigan to do what Saints have done this year and what Castleford did last year.
Yeah, look, the perception for me, from looking from outside, in my formative years, Wigan, there was only one club from England. It was Wigan, and they were phenomenal, and they had superstars that we were putting posters up around. So I totally agree with that, and I think Wigan...
Of which Edwards was one, of course.
100%, a lot of them were, and if any player, legend from Australia wanted to try and get to England, Wigan was where you wanted to be, if you could be.
Huddersfield and Catalans have started playing some nice stuff, and I think that's one of the reasons why they've started to do well. We're just in a period now where we're just evolving away from the duller style that maybe Michael Maguire brought over sort of 7, 8 years ago. I think Hull have been left behind a little bit with their style of play.
It's usually a truism of sport that teams lower down the food chain, if you will, copy the teams that win. So when you know,
Melbourne set the bar.
Melbourne, exactly. So people think that they're winning like that, so that's the way to win. So we'll do that. So if a team playing some expansive stuff wins, then of course
if Cameron Smith comes up with a new wrestle, you can set your clock on it. 4 weeks time, every club in that comp is doing that new wrestle, and that's been on for decades. But let's not necessarily go that way either. I think let's not go that way.
But you made an interesting point in the second part, Damian. You're talking about the recruitment. This is one of my big things, that the most important person at a sports club is the person doing the recruiting of the players, and that may be the coach, but it may not be necessarily the coach. So how important is it that whoever's doing it, and I know Chris Radlinski and Ian Lenigan is sort of in charge of it, but surely Lamb and Edwards are going to have an input that we can get the recruiting right here, because Edwards isn't going to just wave a magic wand and make everyone turn into superstars.
We talked about the management structure, and you mentioned those men involved. They'll be recruiting for the club, and Shaun, being such a legend of the club, will also. So he's not going to come and spend overs on a contract for someone that's going to help him for 6 months. They're well built to recruit for a long term.
They've had some real injury problems this year of Wigan, but one of the real oddities about the whole structure of the club this year for me, going back to pre-season, was the whole Sam Powell, Tommy Luluai, George Williams dynamic. I couldn't really see.
Well, no one knows if Williams is even going to be there. Actually,
but that was. But coming into this season, they looked a quality half-back short to me, and I think that has probably been apparent throughout the season. As functional as Wigan always are, they hang on like no other team. But I do think that will be job number one for both Adrian Lamb and Shaun Edwards, will be to identify the future of that midfield.
I don't actually agree with your statement, Rod. I would still want a top quality coach, but as I said before, there just aren't that many around. But still, if you can find the right coach, they can come in, they can get your halfbacks clicking, they can get your ball players playing in the right way, and they can improve players.
But all the teams with top coaches is the point. I mean, if you swapped, Holbrook for Powell, would it really make any difference?
Holbrook has come in and not signed many players, and he's made a big
impact. He's the best player in the competition, man.
But their forward pack is still massively different to last.
The difficulty for Shaun is, and you talk about same pitch, same coloured ball, their structures are very different. Rugby union have specific coaches, a little bit more NFL. They have a maul, a ruck and scrummage coach, they have a forwards coach, they have a backs coach, a halves coach, a kicking coach. At an NRL level, you really will have your head coach run all your systems, because you're in a sliding defence and you're not broken up into your forwards and backs. But also, you might have a consultant kicking coach or a halves coach. Wigan won't need that, but they've got it. So that'll be the key is gelling all that together. And Shaun's a leader; he'll do that.
Yeah. I have no doubt at all.
Right, so
if you can get the right people.
I don't know how you judge success, because it's obviously only 3 trophies available, and you could still be the best team and not win any of those. But if it's judged on trophies, do you think they will be winning trophies under these two guys, Lamb first and then Edwards?
I don't think either Adrian Lamb or Shaun Edwards will be scoring any tries or kicking goals, Rod. I think it depends who they've got.
That would be a thing, wouldn't it?
Well, they may well have to, but it will depend on the guys that they have.
So it's a thumbs up
on
from
the
you.
field.
Is that a good appointment?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've question marks over the Lamb one because a 1 year appointment is very risky to appoint a coach for 1 year.
Right.
It really there's not much precedent for it, and when it's happened, it's generally not been
And
successful.
will Shaun Wayne have the fairy tale finale by walking out at Old Trafford and picking up the trophy?
He's got as good a chance as anybody, because if they do cement that second spot, that means a home semi-final, and the DW has been an absolute fortress this year, and if you can guarantee you're at Old Trafford, it's anybody's game.
If St Helens don't improve, then Wigan will beat them.
Very quickly, Damian?
I don't think they will.
No, right. And on that negative note from you, Damian, there, it's time to wrap up this week's edition of Rugby League Back Chat. If you want to find out any more information about what's on Free Sports TV, go to our website, www.freesports.tv. Thanks to our guests, to Danny Lockwood from League Weekly, the publisher thereof, no less. Richard de la Riviere has been here, the author of 100 Days That Shook Rugby League, and the former chairman of Cronulla Sharks, Damian Irvine, has joined us too. Hope you've enjoyed the programme. Dave Woods will be back in this seat next week on Rugby League Back Chat. Until then, thanks for watching and goodbye.
Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com.